All right, we are now recording again. Appreciate everybody tuning in. My name's Cody Maxwell, the Fannin County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources, and this will kick off our September cow-calf series, which will focus on things that we're dealing with in this point in time for the year. When we think of our just a second, let me admit everybody in the room here. All right. When we think about the time of the year that we're in right now, moving into the first part of September, many of our cow herds around Fannin County and the North Texas area, about 80% of them are going to be spring calving cow herds. Therefore, beginning their calving season about the 1st of February, continuing on through the end of April or first part of May. The other 20% of our calving seasons, our cow herds for the county, are going to be either fall or winter calving cow herds, calving from September to November, and we do have some that calve December to February, which would be our winter calving herds. But for the most part, again, many of our cow herds are going to begin calving during the springtime. So it makes us begin thinking right now for this time of the year about weaning those calves and considerations for weaning those calves. And that's what we're going to talk about in our time together today is we're going to try to give you the tools to set you up for success when you go to weaning your calves. I'm going to talk on some numbers too today, some different considerations that you can do for those weaned calves that are actually going to put money back into your pocket on a couple of different levels. Dr. Jason Banna, he'll talk about that next week from a feeding ration standpoint. And then the next week, we're going to talk about pregnancy testing cows. So the third week in September, which will also help put more money back into your pocket as well, culling those open cows. And then we'll close out the month of September. We'll have Mr. Donald Brown with R.A. Brown Ranch. He's going to be talking to us about bull purchasing considerations with those fall bull sales that'll be coming up. So as we move into this presentation here today on weaning calves, I want to start off by talking about the different methods of weaning that we have. There's 4 different types, and we'll talk about all 4 of these in depth in the presentation today. You've got the trailer weaning method, corral weaning method. There's devices now that we call mechanical weaning devices that you can actually put in the calf's nose. We'll talk about that and how that works. And then the fence line weaning method. So to start off today, I want to talk about the trailer weaning method, or many people will call this the blacktop weaning method. As you see calves being loaded onto a semi-trailer here, and they're going to be hauled to market. But the trailer weaning method, or the blacktop weaning method, is simply whenever we gather those calves up and we split them off the cow and load them straight up in the trailer and haul them straight to the sale barn. That's why they call it the blacktop weaning method. Typically, whenever we do this, obviously weather has a little bit to play in it. And we'll talk about that here after a while in the presentation. But many people, what they typically do is it's a matter of convenience when you're looking at this method. Many times what we'll do is the day before the sale or the morning of the sale, depending on which sale you go to, depending on what time the sales start, we'll get those calves up and haul them to the sale barn. So if you haul the calves the day before, which is what a lot of people will do to get them there and not have to worry about you being in a rush the morning of the sale, what ends up happening is a little thing we call shrink. And shrink is going to be defined as weight lost on a calf during a specific period of time in their life. Shrink can happen in several different scenarios. If cattle are being trucked a long ways, we can have shrink occur while they're standing on a trailer. Shrink can occur in a short time frame when we're actually weaning those calves with some other different methods. Shrink can occur while they're standing in a pen at the sale barn waiting to sell. But the amount of shrink is what we want to look at. Obviously, we can expect shrink when we're trucking cattle a long ways, and usually we'll figure in somewhere between a 2 to a 4% shrink during that time frame. But in the case that we're talking about right now, in the blacktop weaning method, the trailer weaning method, whenever we wean them straight off the cow, haul them to the sale barn and drop them out, the amount of shrink that can occur from the time that calf leaves that cow to the time he walks through the sale ring and is weighed is 4 to 10% of his actual body weight. Now, I want to put this in perspective for you, because when we do this, we want to be able to present you real life scenarios. That way it can help you making informed decision about your cattle. So the reference I'm going to make throughout this whole presentation is to a 550 pound calf. So if we take a 4 to 10% shrink that occurs from the time that calf leaves its mama to the time that it's weighed at the sale barn, we're going to take the average of that, which would put us at 7%. So 7% shrink on a 550 pound calf is going to equate to 38.5 pounds. It could be more than that if they do happen to have the 10% shrink, or it can be slightly less than that at the 4% shrink. But you're going to be somewhere between that 4 to 10% shrink whenever that calf's just blacktop wean. So if we look at a steer calf, there's various prices that are going on right now. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. They're way better than they have been over the last several months, though. But this 550 pound steer calf, we're going to value him at $1.50. So if we look at that 7% shrink coming off the top of that, at $1.50, that's going to equate to $57.75 straight up off the top of that calf that you've lost by doing this trailer weaning method. If you look at a heifer calf, at a 7% shrink, we're going to value her at $1.40 a pound. That's $53.90 that you've lost right off the top of that calf, and that's money that we really can't see, but we have to value it in there, because the shrink's going to happen whether you like it or not if you don't go through a preconditioning phase or a backgrounding phase that we'll talk about later on. So let's put this in a perspective of looking at a lot of our cow herds around here. Our average cow herd is right around about 30 mama cows per operation is about our average. Well, let's look at some of these smaller acreage scenarios. A cow herd of 10 cows. So let's say you're hauling 10 calves to the sale barn that you've weaned off of your cows. There again, you've done the blacktop weaning method, pull them straight off the cow, haul them to the sale barn. You take those 10 calves. That would mean if we go off of those averages, a 7% shrink, the $1.50 steer, the $1.40 heifer, you're leaving $558.25 on the table right off of the top. That's money that you've lost automatically by the trailer weaning method and off of the shrink. Other considerations that we need to think about when we're doing this method is, obviously in the fall months, in the spring months, cattle probably aren't going to shrink as much because the weather's prettier. But those cold months and the super hot months where they're out there either balling and not knowing what a water trough is, not going and drinking like they should be, or in the cold months when they're sitting out there shivering, waiting to go through the sale ring, we could occur a lot more shrink than the numbers that I've presented to you here in this presentation. So some considerations. We realize with saying all of that, we realize that this may be the method that you have to go with. There may not be any choice. You may have to blacktop wean those calves. But want you to take into consideration some of the numbers that we've presented to you, and with that, if you're able to consider some of these methods that are coming up, we invite you to do so, and we'll be happy to help you with some of the ones that we're about to present. So the next one is going to be the corral weaning method. So this type of method of weaning calves right here is simply going to be keeping those calves in small confinement feeding. And many times it may be a small lot like this. In some cases, it might actually be your corral in which you gather your cattle up in to work them and vaccinate them. But a method that is probably a little tougher method whenever we look at the weather during the fall months, especially the weather we've gotten this week. Whenever you're corral weaning and you get 4 inches of rain, obviously there's going to be some mud that's associated with that. So from a standpoint of labor, it might be a little tougher for you going out there and wading through the mud to try to get these calves fed. But definitely a method whenever we don't have extra pastures, whether it be pastures you own or pastures that you lease. If we don't have grass available to take these calves to, however, we're wanting to background these calves or precondition these calves for the next person in the phase, which will be the stocker operator. If we're wanting to precondition these calves before going on to him, and you don't have grass available, then corral weaning method will work. And we can still achieve added value or premiums on these calves by doing this corral weaning method. Some numbers just to present to you through our Texas Beef Cattle Alliance, some surveys and evaluations that we've done over the last couple of years. Those that have done the corral weaning method have still achieved at least $75 over what they anticipated making on these calves. So you're looking at about a $75 per head added premium or added value, however you want to call it, on top of what you would have gotten had you have not weaned these calves. So corral weaning method, a little more labor intensive, however, still one that definitely works well. The next method that we're going to move into will be the mechanical weaning device. We've got a couple of people in the county that actually utilize this method for weaning calves. It's obviously from a welfare standpoint, it's probably a preferred method if you can do this. However, from a labor standpoint, it's a little bit more difficult. How this method works is what you'll actually do is about 7 to 10 days prior to weaning, even as much as 14 days, 2 weeks prior to weaning. What you'll do as a producer is you'll gather all your cattle up, cows and calves, and you'll run all these calves through the chute, and you'll put this mechanical weaning device in their nose, such as this. And so it hangs right there in the nostrils of the calves, and what it has is it's these little spikes, and you can kind of see them there on the left side of our screen. It'd be the right side of this calf's nose here, but you can see the little spikes that are on there. Some of these devices will be metals. This is a plastic device, but some of them are actually metal devices. But when you kick these calves out, you'll turn the cows and calves all back out together. When this calf goes up there to nurse from that cow, it's these little spikes are actually going to poke her there on the udder. Therefore, she's going to kick that calf off, and he's going to get pretty aggressive. He's going to want to get up in there and nurse. But this device, with it being down over his nose, we know that when he goes up underneath that cow to nurse for her, it's physically not possible for him to get his mouth around his teeth. And also, he's going to be getting kicked at too while he's trying to get up there and nurse. So it's just not possible for him to nurse. Well, he's still able to, when the cow goes and beds down at night, he's still able to go and bed down next to her. He's still able to be right there next to mom. He just simply can't nurse. Now, when this calf goes down to graze, the flap's gonna adjust forward, and so he's still able to wrap his tongue around grass and pull, still able to graze the way that we would want him to. It just simply stops him from being able to nurse from this cow. It's a lot of times you'll hear it called a quiet wean device. There is absolutely no stress that's involved with this weaning method. There again, the calf's able to be with mama for anywhere from 7 to 14 days after he's had this put in. So he has to learn while he's still in the same pasture with her to become an independent animal. And so it makes that weaning time frame much less stressful. Sometimes what people will do whenever they do this is they'll during that time frame, I realize that right now the grass is growing good, but they may start going out there and stringing some cubes or stringing some feed out for these cows just to get those calves kind of used to coming to feed a little bit, which again is something we'll talk about at the end of this presentation and in a lot more detail next week. But that's something that we can do as far as whenever we look at bump training these calves. We can kind of start trying to teach them when they're in this time frame of learning how to become independent for themselves. We can try to start teaching them how to eat as well. Again, the people that are using this I've been in conversation with them, and again, it's completely stress free, works well. The only thing is if you get your cattle up yourself and you handle all the labor yourself, if you want to charge yourself, obviously that's something that you can do, incorporate that into this fat grounding phase. Or you may have to hire labor to come out and help you do this. If so, if you hire labor to come out and help you work your cattle, help you wean your cattle, you're going to incur 2 labor charges on this, because one, you've got to get the cattle up, you've got to get these weaning devices in the calf's nose, and then 2, you've got to get the calves up and sort them off the cows after that 7 to 14 day period. So only bad thing is there will be a double labor charge in there. One thing you may be sitting there asking yourself or considering, will these fall out of their nose? The answer is yes. They're, over time they've made them a lot better to where they'll stay in the nostrils a lot easier. But I would say from what I have heard, I've talked with a couple of people. One particular person did this on 100 calves, and only 2 fell out. So you're looking at a 2% loss right there, which is completely minimal. I've talked to some other people on about a 40 to 50 head cow herd that have used these before and have had up to 4 fall out. Both groups were using two different types of devices in the nose. So we can have anywhere from about a 2 to a 10% loss on these that actually fall out of the nose. Again, it's minimal, and for the stress that you're minimizing with this down to basically 0, it's obviously something that's worth it if you can justify it. The next one that we're going to talk about is a fence line weaning method. This will be the one whenever you look through research, whenever you look through publications from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Many times on the fence line weaning method, you're going to see preferred method or recommended method out next to this. And so you can see this is a corral right here. We've got some feed bunks that are stretched out here for these calves. And you can see that their mamas are right there next to the corral on the other side of it. This was about day 2 on this particular set of calves, and all of them's in the bunk right there, as you can see, except for 2 of them that are right over next, kind of in the background of the picture. that are right over next, standing to their mamas up there against the fence. So how this method works is number one, first and foremost, you better have a good fence in between those cows and the calves. A 5-wire bob wire will not cut it. You're going to have calves in with cows the next day, or you'll have cows in with calves the next day, and you're probably going to have some busted wires and some fence that you're going to have to fix. A 6-wire bob wire will not cut it. It just, a bob wire fence simply won't get the job done on this. At minimum, you're probably going to need the cattle panels stretched up with some pretty good support with T-posts going down through there. That's going to be your at minimum that you want to do. So you want as much of a solid see-through wall that you can get in between these cows and calves. Obviously, a pipe fence will work great. The thing about the pipe fence, if you can have cattle panels up welded to it like this, it's probably your most ideal method. The method, or the way that you're not going to have to worry about anything. Sometimes if we've got pipe fencing in between those cows and calves, depending on how wide the slats are, if a calf can't get his head through, you're going to be fine. If a calf can get his head through, the space in between our railing, that calf's still going to be able to nurse that cow. So that's something that you may want to give some consideration to. If the space is too large in between there, cattle panels are cheap. They run anywhere from about, depending on where you get them from, about $18 to $22 a 16-foot panel. So you may be simply able to wire up cattle panels down through there. So just some things to think about on the fence between the cows and the calves, because when we say this, we'll hear some people say, well, fence line weaning, I hate it. It didn't work for me. Well, we'll ask the question, what kind of fence did you have in between them? Well, I had a barbed wire fence in between them, and it just, if that's the case, you're going to be displeased with fence line weaning for sure, because you'll have them mixed together the day after. It'll sure enough happen to you. So again, a little more on fence line weaning, how this works is we have that good fence in between the cows and the calves. Mama is right there next to these calves, and basically how the communication works between them, there's obviously some type of communication between cows and calves, but that cow's basically there to let that calf know it's okay. It's okay to go over there and stick your head in that water trough and get a drink of water. It's okay to go over there to that feed bunk and eat out of it. The two calves against the fence haven't quite got that assurance from mama just yet. But she's there. She can see them. The calf can see the cow. When it comes time at night for these calves to bed down, on that first night of weaning, you're probably going to have quite a bit of balling no matter what method, except for the quiet wean method with the mechanical weaning device. There won't be any balling at all. But this one, you're going to have some balling. By night 2, that should be decreased to only about 10 to 25% of those calves balling. You shouldn't have any more than about 25% of those calves balling on night 2. They've been able to get their bellies full. Mama's right there bedding down right next to them, and they can bed right down next to mama, right next to that fence. So by day 3 on this, you won't have any balling at all on day 3. In the corral weaning method, one thing that I didn't mention on that, typically our corral weaning method, if you go back a couple of slides we showed you, that's going to be when we leave the cows in one pasture, we trailer the calves away to the corral. That's sometimes how that one will work. Well, what you get with that, we like to keep them in a confined setting. Again, on the fence line weaning, if we can, the smaller area we can confine them to a little bit, the better, just because it keeps them from walking that fence line. And that's one thing we see with the corral weaning method. The downside to it, again, it works. It's a way that we can precondition, we can background these calves. But these calves are going to walk a lot. They're going to be looking for mama. They're going to be balling a lot. I've done it before where I've had calves in a corral that I've fence line weaned, and I've also stuck some calves in there with them that were corral weaned in the same place, but we trailered them away from their mamas. The calves that were fence line weaned, by day 3, not a one of them were balling. By day 3 on the corral wean calves, all of them were still balling. Usually your balling doesn't quit on corral wean calves until about day 4 or 5. So it's one thing to consider. Again, with the fence line weaning, it's done by day 3 and mostly done by day 2. These calves are going to get in a bunk a lot quicker. They're going to go to a water trough a lot quicker. So this is going to be just due to the labor that's minimized with this type of method. It'll be your recommended method. If you can handle the labor on the mechanical weaning device method, obviously that is a good one to go with. We're going to move into a section now and talk about tips for weaning these calves. So number one, first and foremost, pay attention to the environment. We're going to have some stress that's associated with this because the calf is not able to nurse from mama. Mama's not there to tell them when to eat unless you're doing the fence line method. She's not there to tell them when to drink unless you're doing the fence line method. And so there's some stress that's associated with weaning. We want to do everything we can to minimize stress if at all possible. The only way we can eliminate it is through that mechanical weaning device. But us as producers, us as managers, we want to do everything we can to minimize it. This week, I guess it couldn't have worked out better to do this presentation today and this week that we're in this week. Monday would have been a terrible day to wean calves. We had, for most parts of the county, anywhere from about 1.5 inches up to about 4 inches of rain on Tuesday into Wednesday. And so some places saw even higher than that, up to 5 or 6 inches. If you're putting these calves in a corral and you've got that much rain coming down that heavy, and going to pond up that much in areas, make those corrals real muddy, we're just adding to stress and potential problems that we can have. And so check the forecast, know what's going to be going on in the next 4 or 5 days. Once we get these calves weaned, obviously it's not a big a problem whenever we get the rainfall during those fall months, or we get those snaps of cooler weather. But boy, when we go from on Saturday, it was about 102 degrees with a 113, 115 degree heat index, to middle part of this week being in the 70s during the day, moving up into the 80s some days, and then being in the 70s at night. It's too much of an environmental climate swing to be able to try to get calves weaned, and we just put an added level of stress on them when they're going from being with mama to not being with mama. So first and foremost, pay attention to the environment. Perform castration, dehorning, and other health management practices prior to weaning, or I don't have it on there, after weaning. Now I realize, and I want to say this before we go any further on this particular slide. You keep hearing me talk about labor expenses. I realize that there's people on this call that may be listening to this, and people that we talk with on a daily basis that hire it out to have people do all the working of their cattle that they do, to do all of these herd health management practices, to do their weaning. So I realize there's labor charges on some of this. And if you're hiring out cowboys for one day to come out and help you with sorting your calves and pregnancy testing your cows and doing these herd health management practices, such as your vaccination protocols, castration, dehorning, things like that, if you want to minimize your cost, obviously you're going to have to get it all done on the same day. If you're able to get those calves up prior to the day you strip the calves off of those cows, go ahead and get this stuff done 2 weeks prior to weaning. Go ahead, and obviously if we can get them castrated earlier on in life, that is ideal. But if we have to do it once we get to that weaning stage, that's just the fact of the matter. But do all of that 2 weeks prior to weaning to help minimize some stress off of those cows. If you don't do it 2 weeks prior to weaning, go ahead and get those calves weaned and do it 2 weeks after weaning. Some people will tell you, I don't want to do it 2 weeks after weaning, and I can't do it 2 weeks before, but I want to do it the day of that I strip those calves off, because I want a respiratory vaccination in those calves. And by all means, we understand that. By saying this, all we're trying to do is minimize some stress that we can incur on those calves on the day that we strip them off the cows. And that time frame which we go through, which is kind of that balling phase on those calves, about 4 to 5 days. Again, I want to make sure and say this a couple of times on here. If the labor charges are kind of an issue and you don't want to pay double labor charges, I realize you got to do it all on the day you strip them off. So we with giving you this slide, we do realize those things. I want to spend just a minute here talking about the castration. And those of you that have heard me talk about herd health management practices before, you know that I'm a huge proponent of castrating calves. And anybody you talk to in Extension, our beef cattle specialist, any industry leaders that you talk to, any alliances that you work with, any sale barns, livestock commissions, livestock auctions, special sales that you may talk to, every single one of them is going to be for castrating your calves. If you don't perform the castration while the calf's on the mother, and you blacktop wean those calves or wean those calves in the trailer method, the first method that we talked about, or if you background your calves and you don't castrate them, the first thing that is going to get done to that bull calf when he goes to the next phase of his life, to that stocker operator, is he is going to get castrated. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, that's the first thing that they are going to do. So when you look at it from that next person in the phase of this calf's life, which will, in our cases as cow-calf producers, is going to be that stocker operator, they have to assume some risk with those calves, purchasing those bull calves. And so obviously there's going to be a discount that's associated with that. And again, I want to take you back to those numbers that we talked about during the trailer weaning method. We're going to look at that same calf, that 550-pound calf, in this case a bull calf, and I want to give you some numbers here that just to put it in a real life today perspective for you. Typically around here, and you'll hear all of your sale barn managers, sale barn owners, livestock commission owners, they will tell you this, but you're going to get discounted about 10 cents per pound on those bull calves versus a steer calf. That's just, it doesn't matter what year you're in right here in this area with these sale barns, these livestock commissions. It doesn't matter if it's 2020 or 2010. It's 10 cents per pound on the discount from the bull calves versus those steer calves. So let's go back to that 550-pound calf that we looked at. If you don't castrate that calf, you automatically leave $55 on the table. That's what it's going to cost you for not castrating those bull calves. Well, go back up to that shrink that we're going to occur if you don't background and you don't castrate. You add that $55 to that $53.90 that we looked at just a minute ago on trailer weaning, and you've left over $100 on the table by not weaning your calves and not castrating them. Times that by 10 calves, that's $1,000 we leave on the table. But let's go back to that scenario that we looked at. If you own 10 mama cows, and you know, in the best case scenario, I know this doesn't always happen, but let's just say you had 100% weaning rate on those calves. Again, I know that is not the case. That doesn't happen, but for the sake of example here in easy math, that's what we're going to use. For 5 steers, or for five of those 10 head being steer bull calves, if you don't castrate them, you've left $275 on the table. So add that to that total 10 calves that we left on the table by not weaning them, by blacktop weaning them, hauling them straight to the sale barn, and the shrink that we had to add on for not weaning those calves. So if you do 275 from not castrating those bull calves to $558.25 left on the table from the shrink that you had, that's a total of $833.25 total on those 10 calves that we've left on the table by not weaning them and not castrating the bull calves. We hadn't even got into the topic of performing these best management practices, such as the vaccination protocols that we can go through, the 45 to 60 days weaning that we'll talk about here in a little bit. That's just in the shrink and castrating, $833.25 left on the table. All right, we're going to take it a little bit deeper here on a real life perspective for you. So on that 10 cow herd that you have, if let's say you purchase high quality Bermuda grass round rolls for those cows, and you feed 120 days out of the year. Let's say this year, 2020, that good Bermuda grass bale that you're not going to have to hardly supplement any feed along with, it's going to run you about $55 a bale. Again, if you feed all winter long, 120 days, that's going to cost you about 50 bales of hay. We'd look at it on about 5 bales per cow. You may not feed all of those, or you may feed all of them. It just depends on the winter we get. So at $55 a bale, 50 bales of hay, your hay cost is going to cost you $2,750. Real life perspective right here. I mean, this is September 2020 numbers right here. Therefore, if you didn't wean your calves to avoid the shrink and castrate your bull calves, you would have been able to pay for 30% of your hay cost with the money that you left on the table by not castrating and not weaning your calves. That $833 would have went towards that $2,750 of your hay cost. Could have covered 30% of it just in doing these things. So it's just a little extra on this particular slide that we're on right here. Again, I said before, those of you that know me know that I'm big on herd health management practices on these. And castration is just one thing that it's so simple to do. And if you don't know how to do it, there's people out there that'll come do it for you. There's vets that'll come do it for you. There's day labor that'll come do it for you. So there again, don't leave this money on the table when it's easy to get done. The next thing, and again, we're talking about tips for successful weaning on these calves. Wean your calves for about 45 to 60 days. That's what we're seeing now is industry kind of switching to about a 60-day standard here on backgrounding these calves. A lot of your special calf sales are going to have a minimum of 45 days weaning. We see a lot of them that have a preferred 60 days weaning. So minimum 45, preferred 60. So this time frame that we see on these calves, again, it's work involved for you as a producer. If you have some grass to go to, it takes some of that labor away for you. You might just have to go out every other day and maybe feed those calves just to continue to keep them bump trained for that next person in line, which would be the stalker, and then the next person after that, which will be the feedlot. But within this 45 to 60 day time frame, we can get those calves completely independent on their own, where they know when a bucket comes up or a feed truck comes by, they know to head to that feed bunk and stick their head in it and eat. Biggest problem that we see with animals, if they're not eating and they're not drinking, that's when something's going on. In a lot of cases, there's probably some type of sickness or disease that they're dealing with. And so we're during this time frame, we're not putting a whole lot of weight on these calves. You know, I hear people that'll say sometimes, well, you know, I want these calves to gain a lot of weight during this time frame. Well, I don't know if you've looked at some market reports and stuff, but if you see in parentheses out next to some of those reports, fleshy, we don't want to get tagged as fleshy on these calves. We got to leave some room for that next person in line to be able to put some weight on these calves. Average weight that you're looking for these calves to gain in all different scenarios, it's going to be different. But during this 45 to 60 day time frame, on our average weight, you're going to be anywhere from about a half a pound to a pound and a half a gain on these calves. And that's about all we want. You know, some people, they're going to be looking to strive for 2.5 to 3 pounds a gain. That's when you're going to get that fleshy tag and you're going to get discounted for that. And that's why they put those on the market reports to be an example to you, to you know, make sure that next person in line, that stocker, he's got to take these calves from averaging about 550 to 600 pounds. They're going to be selling them at about 810 pounds. At 800, some of them, depending on heifers and steers, it may be 750 to 850 pounds, but somewhere averaging about that 800 to 810 pound range is going to be when that next person in line is going to be selling these calves. Well, if we take that weight away from them, then we're going to be discounted from that. And so essentially us is, again, we don't want these calves to go backwards. We want them to go forwards. But during this time frame, you know, we're only going to be somewhere between that 30 to 60, maybe 70 pounds, 75 pounds worth of gain on these calves. But in many cases, in different feeding rations that you'll hear Dr. Vanna talk about next week on our webinar series, many of you are going to be somewhere between 30 to 50 pounds of gain on the average on these calves. And so we're not looking to get them fat. We're just looking to make them head in the right direction and essentially train these calves to drink out of a water trough, to drink on their own out of a pond, to follow a feed bucket, to know what a feed truck is if that's your method of feeding, to know what a feed bunk is, to know that whenever they see feed or hear feed rattle and hit that feed bunk, they need to hustle over there and stick their head in it, because later on in their life, when they get to that stocker phase, they're going to have to gain somewhere between 2 to 3.5 pounds a day. Once they hit that feedlot stage, they're going to have to average gaining somewhere between 2.5 to 3 pounds a head per day. And so they've got to learn, and it's our responsibility, if we're going to background or precondition these calves, that responsibility falls upon us to get these calves trained. And that time frame takes about a minimum of about 45 days. You kind of heard me talk a little bit about this back in when we talked about the castration, dehorning, and herd health management practices on the day of weaning, if you can. And again, I can't stress enough the labor charges in every situation. If you have to perform everything on the day of, we realize that. If you don't have to, if you can get people to come out there twice, then go ahead and vaccinate those calves. Do all your herd health management practices 2 weeks prior to. If not, simply just pull those calves off the cows the day you wean them. Another thing, and we'll talk about this in the 3rd week in September, on September the 17th, it's a good thing to go ahead and while you've got these cows up, go ahead and pregnancy test those cows if you can. It's just something else that you can get done on that day. Again, we don't want to add any stress whatsoever to these calves other than what they're going to deal with on the day that we strip them from their mama. And we'll talk more about that on September the 17th. But pregnancy testing these cows, you got to do it. And we'll talk about the money you can leave on the table if you don't pregnancy test these cows on the 17th of this month. But from a stress standpoint on these calves, for the calf itself, just strip them off the cow. If you need to go ahead and get those cows pregnancy tested, or if we're close enough to a fall deworming time frame that you can justify going ahead and deworming those cows for a fall deworming, go ahead and get your stuff done with your cows if you can. All right, we're going to close out our presentation today with just talking a little bit about bunk training these calves. Again, you've heard me mention this as we've gone through the presentation today about bunk training these calves, training them to a water trough. But again, I can't stress enough, as a cow-calf producer, if we are going to make the commitment to precondition these calves and background them, then we've got to do the things necessary to make it to where we can achieve added value or added premium from that next person in line, which is what we're looking to do. This particular set of calves, this is day one, and I wished because of the design format here in the presentation, I wished I could show you the whole picture here. But there was 3 bunks lined out in this particular pen. This was the day that these calves was weaned. The afternoon these calves were weaned, they stripped off the cows that morning. This bunk was solid calves as you went down through there. So, and I'm sure Dr. Banner will go into a little bit more of this next week. I know he's going to get more in depth on the actual feeding rations for these calves throughout that 45 to 60 day weaning period of these calves. But as far as, the first few days, getting these calves to go over and stick their head in a feed bunk, I have found that utilizing high quality Bermuda grass hay is one of the best things that you can do for these calves. It's inexpensive as well. Forage is key. Whenever we're looking at, and we can talk all different types of feeding strategies for calves, cows, winter feeding strategies, looking at our summer pastures. When you boil it all down to a healthy cow, one of the first important things that we can say is key is forage. If you don't have the proper forage, if you don't have a desirable, palatable forage, something that they're going to like, something that they're going to be drawn to be able to eat, we're not going to have healthy cattle. And that's we can talk about it all day from a cow standpoint. In the subject matter at hand today, from a weaning calf standpoint, forage is still going to be key. If we don't have if we're in a corral weaning method and we're dry lot weaning these calves the whole time, obviously forage is going to be key. We're going to have a high quality hay. If we're putting these calves out on a grass pasture for 45 to 60 days, save that pasture leading up to weaning these calves. If it fits the budget, maybe consider fertilizing that pasture to get some good growth out there. Obviously, we want to control weeds within it to minimize competition that's out there. But we could talk all day about how important forage is for these cattle. And when it comes to training calves in a bunk, and again, everybody's got a preferred method. There's different methods that work. For me, it seems like this method has been the most cost effective. But what I do is I go and purchase enough hay to get me through about a 7-day period at minimum, 10-day period at most, to actually feed these calves in a bunk. We can cheapen things up, obviously, with some round rolls. As I said, it's about $55 a round roll. This grass hay like this, Bermuda grass hay in a square bale, it's going to be that horse quality hay. It's going to have that tagline on there. Right now, it's going to run you about $8 a bale on the average, depending on where you get it from. Some of it might be a little bit more, some of it's going to be less. So what we want to do in everything when it comes to feeding our animals is we want to price everything out per pound. What is it going to cost me per pound on this hay? What is it going to cost me per pound on the feed that I might be feeding these calves? And then I want to look at, all right, how much are they going to be consuming? Well, if we look at it on a 2% of their body weight on these calves, that means that on a 550-pound calf, they're going to be eating about 11 pounds of forage on a daily basis. And forage, again, we could be talking about grass pasture. In this case, we're talking about hay. So 11 pounds on a price per pound basis on forage. If I'm paying $8 for a square bale of hay, that's 12 cents per pound. If I'm paying $55 for a round roll of hay, that's 6 cents per pound. So when we look at it on a price per head basis, day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way up to about day 5 to 7, if I'm just looking at bump training these calves on 11 pounds per head per day, I'm looking at about $1.32 per head if I'm feeding square hay. If I move away from the square hay on day 3, 4, 5, somewhere around in there, and I move to a round roll of hay, I'm looking at about 30 cents per day. Excuse me. That would be on a feed ration. I got a little bit ahead of myself right there. But on a round roll, if we move to feeding round roll per day at 11-pound consumption rate on a $55 bale, we're going to be at about 60 cents, 66 cents per head per day. So on square hay, about $1.32 per head per day. On round roll, about 66 cents. On feeding rations that we'll look at, and you'll hear Dr. Banna talk about some of them next week, but about 12 cents to 30 cents per day is about what you should be looking at on this when we're bump training these calves. So on these calves, on starting them in a bump for the first 7 days, I'm going to be about $1.48 per head per day. That's what it's going to cost me to get these calves bump trained. Obviously, there's other opportunities out there for you. There's some commercial feeding rations that are designed to start these calves in a bump. And again, whenever you're doing things, you've got to price everything out per pound, and then look at how much has to be fed for those calves. And so look at it on a price per pound and then price per head per day basis. Everything that we do, we want to put a pencil and a paper to it to make sure that it fits the budget. And so just something that is a lead in and a segue for next week, what Dr. Banna will be talking about. Just want to stress the fact of bump training these calves, how important it is, and then from that standpoint, how important our forage is on these calves. That's the presentation for today. I'm going to go ahead and